Beyond his unforgettable role on Bonanza, Dan Blocker's life has become a reminder that some of the greatest legacies are built not through dramatic headlines, but through quiet consistency. In Hollywood, where careers often rise and fall with changing trends, Dan earned something far more valuable than temporary fame. He earned trust. Directors trusted him to deliver every performance with professionalism. Fellow actors trusted him to support them both on and off the set.
Which made the way
Crew members trusted him to treat everyone with dignity, regardless of job title. Most importantly, audiences trusted him because they believed the sincerity they saw on screen. That trust did not happen by accident. It was the result of decades of hard work, discipline, humility, and life experiences that shaped him long before he ever stepped in front of a television camera. His childhood during the Great Depression taught him gratitude. His years as an athlete taught him discipline and teamwork. The Korean War taught him the terrible cost of violence and the priceless value of peace. Teaching students taught him patience and empathy. Marriage and fatherhood taught him responsibility and unconditional love. Every stage of his journey added another layer to the man audiences would eventually know simply as Hoss Cartwright. One reason Dan's story continues to fascinate historians is because he never followed the traditional Hollywood blueprint for success.
Shocking.
Many aspiring actors moved to California at a young age, chasing fame as quickly as possible. Dan's path was very different. Before becoming an actor, he had already lived several lives. He had been a college athlete, a soldier, a graduate student, a teacher, and a husband. Those experiences gave him a maturity that many performers lacked. When success finally arrived, he was already secure in his identity. He did not need fame to define who he was, because he already understood his values. That quiet confidence allowed him to navigate Hollywood without losing himself. Even as Bonanza became one of the highest-rated television shows in America, Dan remained remarkably grounded. He continued placing family before career, choosing private evenings at home over glamorous Hollywood parties whenever possible.
Echoing through
Friends
Hollywood.
often joked that despite starring in one of television's biggest productions, Dan still behaved like the same friendly Texas schoolteacher they had known years earlier. His influence also extended into the business side of entertainment. While many actors focused exclusively on performing, Dan understood the importance of financial responsibility and long-term planning. He invested carefully, explored opportunities outside acting, and prepared for a future beyond Bonanza. This practical mindset reflected lessons learned from watching his family survive economic hardship during the Great Depression. He understood that careers could change unexpectedly, making stability more valuable than extravagance. Rather than spending lavishly to impress others, he concentrated on creating security for his wife and children. That philosophy distinguished him from many celebrities whose fortunes disappeared after the spotlight faded. Dan believed wealth should provide freedom and opportunity rather than status. The affection audiences felt toward Dan also stemmed from the remarkable consistency between his public and private life. In the entertainment industry, carefully crafted public images often differ dramatically from reality. With Dan, however, people who met him almost always discovered the same qualities they admired in Hoss Cartwright. Reporters frequently noted his willingness to spend extra time with fans, particularly children. Instead of rushing through autograph sessions or treating public appearances as obligations, he approached them as opportunities to express gratitude. Parents often remembered how naturally he interacted with young fans, kneeling to their eye level despite his enormous size, listening patiently to their stories, and making each child feel important. These moments rarely generated headlines, but they left lasting impressions on families who carried those memories for decades. For Dan, kindness was never a publicity strategy. It was simply part of who he was. Hollywood itself changed dramatically after Dan Blocker's death. The 1970s introduced grittier storytelling, more morally ambiguous heroes, and a different style of television drama. As entertainment evolved, characters like Hoss Cartwright became increasingly rare. Yet that change only strengthened appreciation for Dan's work. Looking back, many critics argue that Hoss represented one of the final great television heroes, defined primarily by compassion rather than cynicism. In modern retrospectives, Dan's performance is often praised not only for its warmth, but also for its emotional intelligence. Haas was never portrayed as perfect. He made mistakes, struggled with self-doubt, and occasionally acted impulsively. However, his heart always guided him toward doing what was right. That complexity made him feel like a real human being instead of an idealized fictional hero, allowing audiences to connect with him on a deeply personal level. Dan's death also highlighted the profound impact one individual can have on an entire creative community. After losing him, Bonanza continued production, but those involved consistently acknowledged that the atmosphere was never the same. His absence affected not only storylines but also the daily rhythm of life behind the scenes. Crew members later described walking onto the set and instinctively expecting to hear Dan's familiar laugh or see his towering figure greeting everyone with his characteristic smile. His dressing room became a painful reminder of the friend they had lost. For many, filming without him felt less like continuing a television series, and more like learning to live after losing a member of their own family. That emotional void demonstrated something remarkable. Dan's greatest contribution to Bonanza may not have been any single performance, but the spirit of generosity and unity he brought to the production every day. Today, Dan Blocker's influence extends far beyond classic television enthusiasts. Acting students study his performances as examples of naturalistic storytelling. Historians examine his career as part of television's golden age. Fans continue introducing Bonanza to younger generations, ensuring that Haas Cartwright remains alive in popular culture. His story is frequently cited whenever discussions arise about actors who achieved extraordinary success without sacrificing humility or integrity. In an age dominated by social media, celebrity branding, and constant public attention, Dan's life offers a striking contrast. He demonstrated that genuine respect is earned not through self-promotion, but through consistent character, quiet professionalism, and sincere compassion. Perhaps the most enduring lesson of Dan Blocker's journey is that true greatness often reveals itself in ordinary moments rather than extraordinary achievements. It appears in the father who chooses family over fame, the teacher who believes in struggling students, the soldier who returns from war valuing peace more than conflict, the actor who treats every crew member with respect, and the friend who remains loyal regardless of success. Those qualities cannot be measured by awards, box office numbers, or television ratings. Yet they are precisely the qualities that ensure a person's memory survives long after headlines fade. More than 50 years after his passing, Dan Blocker continues to remind the world that strength without kindness is incomplete, success without humility is empty, and fame without integrity is ultimately forgotten. His life stands as a timeless testament to the enduring power of compassion, decency, and unwavering authenticity, qualities that transformed a young man from rural Texas into one of the most beloved figures in the history of American television, and ensured that both the man and the legend would continue inspiring hearts for generations to come. Even decades after his passing, Dan Blocker's name continues to evoke a sense of warmth that very few television actors have managed to preserve across generations. While countless stars have come and gone since the golden age of television, the image of the towering yet gentle Haas Cartwright remains instantly recognizable to millions of viewers around the world. Part of that enduring appeal lies in the timeless nature of the values Dan represented. The world has changed dramatically since the 1960s. Television has become faster, louder, and more technologically advanced. Audiences now consume entertainment through streaming platforms, social media, and mobile devices, rather than gathering around a single television every Sunday evening. Yet despite these enormous cultural changes, people continue discovering Bonanza and responding emotionally to Dan's performance. That longevity cannot be explained simply by nostalgia. Instead, it reflects the universal qualities he brought to every scene: honesty, kindness, patience, humility, and quiet strength. These are values that remain meaningful regardless of time period, nationality, or generation. Film and television scholars often describe Dan Blocker as one of the finest examples of what is known as presence. Presence is difficult to define because it cannot be measured through awards or technical skill alone. It is the rare ability to command attention naturally without appearing to seek it. Whenever Dan entered a scene, audiences immediately noticed him because of his extraordinary physical stature. Yet within moments, viewers stopped focusing on his size and eye, instead became absorbed by the warmth in his eyes, the calm confidence in his voice, and the sincerity behind every word he spoke. That transformation represented the true brilliance of his acting. He never relied on his imposing appearance to dominate a performance. Instead, he used gentleness to create emotional connection. This subtle mastery explains why his portrayal of Hoss Cartwright still feels believable today, even to audiences accustomed to modern acting styles. Many historians believe that Dan's years as an educator played a larger role in shaping his acting than is often recognized. Teaching requires patience, careful listening, empathy, and the ability to communicate complex emotions in simple ways. Those same qualities became defining characteristics of his performances. Rather than rushing dialogue or exaggerating emotional moments, Dan allowed scenes to breathe naturally, much like an experienced teacher guiding students toward understanding rather than forcing conclusions upon them. His classroom experience also strengthened his remarkable ability to connect with younger actors and child performers. On the Bonanza set, children often felt immediately comfortable around him because he possessed the reassuring demeanor of someone who genuinely enjoyed helping others feel safe and confident. This natural kindness required no rehearsal. It reflected years spent encouraging students to believe in themselves. As historians continue to revisit the golden age of American television, Dan Blocker's contribution becomes even more significant. Bonanza was not merely another successful Western. It became one of the defining television series of the 20th century, helping shape family entertainment for more than a decade. During its remarkable run, the show reached millions of households every week, crossing cultural, political, and generational boundaries. While T. Cartwright family as a whole became iconic. Many television historians argue that Hoss Cartwright served as the emotional center of the series. Ben Cartwright represented wisdom and authority. Adam symbolized intelligence and responsibility, and Little Joe brought youthful energy and charm. Hoss, however, represented the heart. He was the character audiences instinctively trusted, the one children admired without fear, and the one whose compassion balanced the inevitable conflicts that unfolded throughout the series. Without Dan Blocker's unique performance, Bonanza might still have been a successful Western, but it is difficult to imagine it becoming the deeply loved family drama that it ultimately became. The influence of Hoss Cartwright can still be seen in modern storytelling. Many television writers and producers have acknowledged the importance of creating powerful characters who are emotionally open rather than emotionally distant. Before Hoss, large and physically imposing characters were often portrayed as intimidating, dangerous, or lacking intelligence. Dan quietly challenged that stereotype. His Hoss was physically stronger than almost everyone around him, yet he was also thoughtful, forgiving, deeply loyal, and emotionally expressive. He cried when friends suffered, comforted strangers in need, protected children without hesitation, and frequently placed compassion above pride. Those qualities changed audience expectations. Viewers realized that genuine courage did not require emotional hardness. Strength could be measured just as much by patience, empathy, and kindness as by physical ability. That idea, now common in modern storytelling, was still relatively uncommon on television when Dan first introduced Hoss to audiences in 1959. Beyond his performances, Dan's reputation for professionalism became almost legendary within the entertainment industry. Directors frequently commented that he never approached a scene carelessly. Every line was carefully prepared, every rehearsal taken seriously, and every performance delivered with complete commitment. Unlike performers who viewed themselves as larger than the production, Dan believed every department contributed equally to the finished result. He treated camera operators, makeup artists, costume designers, lighting technicians, assistant directors, and production assistants with the same respect he showed producers and network executives. Crew members often remembered that Dan knew many of them by name, asked about their families, and expressed genuine appreciation for their work. In an industry where invisible hierarchies often separated stars from everyone else, Dan quietly ignored those divisions. His humility created an atmosphere of mutual respect that made long filming days far more enjoyable for everyone involved. The remarkable consistency of his character also explains why stories about Dan Blocker have remained overwhelmingly positive throughout the decades. Many celebrities leave behind complicated legacies filled with controversy, scandal, or personal conflict. Dan's story is strikingly different. Biographies, interviews with colleagues, and recollections from friends consistently describe the same qualities: generosity, honesty, patience, humor, loyalty, and unwavering decency. That does not mean he was a perfect man, no human being is, but rather that the values he projected publicly genuinely reflected the way he lived privately. In many respects, he achieved something extraordinarily rare in Hollywood. He earned admiration not only for what he accomplished, but for the manner in which he accomplished it. His marriage to Dolphia Parker remains another important part of that legacy. In an industry where relationships often struggled under the pressures of fame, Dan and Dolphia maintained a partnership built on mutual trust and shared priorities. She had known him long before Bonanza, long before magazine covers and international recognition, and she remained beside him throughout every stage of his remarkable journey. After his unexpected death, Dolphia chose to protect their family's privacy rather than seeking public attention. She dedicated herself to raising their children and preserving the values she and Dan had always shared. Her decision not to remarry and to remain outside the Hollywood spotlight reflected the quiet dignity that had characterized their marriage from the very beginning. Friends often admired the strength with which she carried forward Dan's legacy, ensuring that their children grew up remembering not only the famous actor the world admired, but the loving father they had lost far too soon. The achievements of Dan's children also demonstrate the lasting influence of his example. Rather than relying solely on their father's fame, they pursued careers through hard work and personal dedication. Dirk Blocker established himself as a respected television actor, while David Blocker became a successful producer whose work earned critical recognition within the entertainment industry. Their accomplishments reflected the lessons Dan had emphasized throughout his life. Success should be earned through discipline, integrity, and perseverance, rather than expected because of family connections. Those values continued shaping the Blocker family long after Dan's passing, providing another reminder that a parent's greatest legacy often lives through the principles passed on to future generations. Today, visitors to museums, television archives, and Western film exhibitions continue encountering Dan Blocker's remarkable story. Classic television channels regularly broadcast Bonanza, introducing Hoss Cartwright to audiences who were not yet born when the series originally aired. Streaming platforms have made the show accessible to viewers around the world, ensuring that Dan's performances continue reaching entirely new generations. Social media has even created unexpected opportunities for younger audiences to discover memorable scenes, interviews, and behind-the-scenes stories celebrating his life and career. In many ways, technology has allowed his legacy to expand rather than diminish. A performer whose career began during the early days of color television now continues inspiring viewers in the digital age, a testament to the timeless quality of his work. Ultimately, Dan Blocker's story stands as one of the most inspiring journeys in entertainment history. He began life as a boy born during the hardships of the Great Depression, grew into an exceptional athlete, answered his country's call during the Korean War, discovered acting almost by accident, devoted himself to education, endured years of professional uncertainty, and eventually became one of the most beloved figures in television history. Yet through every triumph and every challenge, he remained guided by the same simple principles. Work hard, stay humble, treat others with respect, protect those you love, and never allow success to change your character. Those values transformed an ordinary man into an extraordinary example. His life reminds us that fame may introduce someone to the world, but integrity determines whether that person will be remembered. More than 50 years after his passing, Dan Blocker's towering physical presence is still remembered, but even more enduring is the greatness of his heart. That, above all else, is the legacy that continues to inspire millions and ensures that the gentle giant from Texas will forever hold a place among the most respected and beloved legends of television history. In the final analysis of Dan Blocker's life, What makes his story so extraordinary is not simply that he became famous, but that he never allowed fame to become the most important part of who he was. History is filled with actors who achieved enormous popularity for a few years before gradually fading from public memory. Dan's journey followed a different path because his reputation rested on something much deeper than celebrity. Every chapter of his life built upon the one before it. The hardships of the Great Depression taught him resilience. His parents' unwavering work ethic taught him humility. Football taught him discipline and teamwork. College introduced him to the unexpected world of acting. Military service during the Korean War exposed him to the devastating realities of violence and strengthened his appreciation for peace. Teaching young students reinforced his patience and compassion. Years of struggling through auditions taught him perseverance. Finally, Bonanza gave him a worldwide audience, allowing millions of people to witness qualities that had already defined him for decades. None of these experiences existed in isolation. Together, they created the remarkable man who became known around the world as Dan Blocker. When television historians rank the greatest performances in Western history, Hoss Cartwright almost always occupies a place near the very top. Yet what makes the performance timeless is not dramatic speeches or unforgettable action scenes. Instead, audiences remember countless quiet moments, the reassuring smile offered to a frightened child, the calm voice comforting a grieving friend, the gentle humor that eased tension around the Cartwright dinner table, or the silent determination to defend someone unable to defend themselves. Dan understood that the most memorable heroes are often those who display humanity rather than invincibility. Hoss did not need to prove his strength because everyone already knew he possessed it. What truly impressed viewers was the way he chose to use that strength, with restraint, compassion, fairness, and love. Those qualities continue inspiring audiences because they reflect the best possibilities of human nature. Even today, the people who worked with Dan Blocker continue describing him with remarkable consistency. They rarely begin by mentioning his success, salary, or popularity. Instead, they talk about his kindness. They remember his booming laugh echoing across the studio lot, his willingness to help nervous younger actors, his habit of greeting crew members warmly each morning, and the genuine interest he showed in the lives of everyone around him. These memories reveal an important truth. While audiences admired the character of Hoss Cartwright, those who knew Dan personally admired the man himself. In many ways, that may represent the greatest compliment any actor could ever receive. Performing a lovable character requires talent. Living as a lovable human being requires character. His sudden death in 1972 also changed the way Hollywood thought about the fragility of life. Dan entered the hospital expecting what doctors considered a routine gallbladder operation. Neither his family nor his colleagues imagined that complications would claim his life only hours later. The shock surrounding his death served as a painful reminder that even the strongest individuals remain vulnerable. Fans around the world struggled to understand how someone who appeared larger than life could disappear so unexpectedly. For many, his passing transformed Hoss Cartwright from a beloved television character into a lasting symbol of life's unpredictability and the importance of appreciating every moment with those we love. His story encouraged countless people to value family more deeply, express gratitude more often, and recognize that true wealth lies not in possessions or fame, but in relationships built on love and respect. The decades following his death have only strengthened appreciation for what Dan accomplished. Bonanza remains one of the longest-running and most influential Western television series ever produced, and Hoss Cartwright continues to rank among its most beloved characters. Classic television networks regularly feature the series, while streaming platforms introduce it to viewers who were born decades after Dan's passing. Modern audiences often express surprise at how emotionally engaging the show remains, discovering that the themes explored by the Cartwright family, loyalty, forgiveness, responsibility, sacrifice, and compassion, are as relevant today as they were during the 1960s. This timeless quality ensures that Dan's work continues reaching people who never had the opportunity to watch him during his lifetime. Perhaps the greatest lesson offered by Dan Blocker's story is that success and humility are not opposites. Society often assumes that extraordinary achievement inevitably changes people, making them more distant, self-important, or disconnected from ordinary life. Dan proved otherwise. Despite becoming one of the highest paid and most recognizable television actors of his generation, he remained devoted to his family, respectful toward colleagues, grateful for every opportunity, and deeply aware of the values that had shaped him long before Hollywood discovered his talent. His modest home, his preference for quiet family life, his commitment to education, and his lifelong appreciation for kindness all demonstrated that genuine greatness begins within a person's character rather than their career. His legacy also extends into a broader cultural conversation about masculinity. During an era when many male heroes were defined primarily by physical dominance, Dan presented a very different image through Hoss Cartwright. Strength was important, but compassion mattered more. Courage was admirable, but humility made it meaningful. Leadership required not only confidence, but empathy. Hoss could defend the innocent when necessary, yet he found equal pride in comforting a friend, helping a stranger, or admitting his own mistakes. Those characteristics continue, making the character feel surprisingly modern despite being created more than 60 years ago. They remind audiences that true strength is measured not by the ability to intimidate others, but by the willingness to care for them. Looking back across the entire journey, from a 14-pound baby born in rural Texas to one of the most beloved figures in television history, Dan Blocker's life reflects the extraordinary possibilities created by perseverance, integrity, and compassion. He never chased fame at the expense of family. He never allowed success to erase humility. He never forgot the lessons learned from hardship, war, education, or ordinary life. Every challenge he faced strengthened the qualities that audiences would later admire most. By the time millions welcomed Hoss Cartwright into their homes each week, Dan had already spent decades becoming the kind of man capable of portraying such a deeply human character with complete authenticity. In the end, Dan Blocker left behind far more than memorable television episodes. He left an example. He showed that kindness is not weakness but strength. He demonstrated that humility can coexist with extraordinary success. He proved that the most unforgettable performances come not from pretending to possess noble qualities, but from genuinely living by them. His story continues, reminding the world that while fame may eventually fade, character endures. Generations from now, viewers may still discover Bonanza, meet Hoss Cartwright for the very first time, and feel the same admiration experienced by audiences in 1959. When that happens, they will not simply be watching a sea tour. They will be witnessing the lasting legacy of a remarkable human being whose life proved that compassion, integrity, loyalty, and quiet dignity remain among the greatest achievements anyone can leave behind. For that reason, Dan Blocker will forever be remembered not only as one of television's greatest stars, but as one of its finest gentlemen, a gentle giant whose heart ultimately became even larger than his legendary presence on the screen. Although Dan Blocker's personal journey had come to an end, the story of Bonanza was far from over. In many ways, the television series entered its most difficult and emotional chapter only after losing the man who had become its heart. To understand why Dan's absence affected the show so deeply, it is important to understand what Bonanza represented at the height of its success. Premiering in 1959, the series was far more than another Western. It was one of NBC's most ambitious productions and one of the first hour-long television dramas filmed entirely in color, a bold decision at a time when most American households still owned black-and-white television sets. Producing the series was expensive, and during its early months, many executives questioned whether the investment would ever pay off. Ratings were disappointing, critics remained uncertain, and there were genuine concerns that the program might be canceled before audiences had a chance to appreciate its unique style. Everything changed when NBC moved Bonanza to its now famous Sunday evening time slot. Almost overnight, the Cartwright family became part of America's weekly routine. Parents finished dinner, children gathered in front of the television, and millions of viewers spent an hour on the Ponderosa Ranch. Week after week, audiences returned not simply because they enjoyed Western adventures, but because they felt emotionally connected to the family at the center of every story. The remarkable chemistry among the cast became one of the greatest strengths of the series. Lorne Greene brought authority and wisdom as Ben Cartwright. Michael Landon provided youthful energy and charisma as Little Joe, Pernell Roberts offered intelligence and sophistication as Adam, and Dan Blocker supplied warmth, humor, and emotional balance as Hoss. Together, they created a believable family unlike anything television audiences had experienced before. While scripts certainly played an important role, much of the magic came from the relationships the actors developed behind the scenes. Long filming schedules lasting months each year naturally created close friendships. They celebrated birthdays together, shared meals between scenes, joked during rehearsals, and supported one another through personal challenges. Crew members frequently described the atmosphere on set as unusually welcoming. Dan played a significant role in maintaining that environment. His easygoing personality, booming laugh, and genuine kindness helped relieve tension whenever long production days became exhausting. New actors appearing as guest stars often remarked that Dan immediately made them feel comfortable, regardless of their experience or reputation. His generosity created an atmosphere where collaboration flourished rather than competition. As Bonanza climbed to the top of the television ratings, its influence spread far beyond entertainment. Families discussed episodes around dinner tables. Children pretended to be members of the Cartwright family while playing outdoors, and viewers developed emotional attachments to characters who seemed almost like relatives. Hoss Cartwright became especially beloved because he embodied values parents hope to teach their children. He was respectful toward his father, loyal to his brothers, protective of strangers, gentle with animals, and compassionate toward anyone facing hardship. Teachers occasionally used episodes to encourage discussions about honesty, responsibility, and moral decision-making. Ministers referenced Hoss in sermons about kindness and humility. Newspapers praised the character as a positive role model during a period of enormous social change in America. Dan Blocker himself remained humble about this influence, often expressing gratitude that audiences found comfort and encouragement through the series. He understood that entertainment could shape people's lives, and he took that responsibility seriously. Behind the cameras, however, producing a long-running television series required enormous discipline. Cast members often worked long hours under physically demanding conditions. Outdoor scenes were filmed in extreme heat, cold, dust, and unpredictable weather. Horseback riding sequences required careful preparation and considerable physical endurance. Memorizing new scripts every week demanded concentration, while maintaining emotional authenticity over hundreds of episodes presented an ongoing artistic challenge. Dan rarely complained about these demands. His years as an athlete, soldier, teacher, and stage performer had prepared him for hard work. Directors appreciated that he consistently arrived on time, fully prepared, and willing to repeat difficult scenes until everyone felt satisfied with the final result. Crew members trusted him because they knew he approached every day's work with professionalism rather than ego. When Dan died unexpectedly in May 1972, the emotional impact reached every corner of the production. The immediate grief experienced by the cast was compounded by practical questions that no one had anticipated. Writers suddenly faced the impossible task of continuing a family drama after losing one of its central figures. Producers considered numerous possibilities, but one conclusion emerged almost immediately. Hoss Cartwright simply could not be recast. Dan had become so completely identified with the role that audiences would never accept another actor attempting to replace him. His combination of physical presence, emotional warmth, and natural sincerity could not be duplicated. Rather than pretending the loss had never occurred, the production chose to acknowledge his absence. This decision reflected not only artistic judgment, but also deep respect for Dan himself. The atmosphere during filming after his death changed dramatically. Crew members later described entering the studio with a profound sense of emptiness. Dan's familiar laughter no longer echoed through the hallways. His dressing room remained a painful reminder of the friend they had lost. Michael Landon, who had shared years of friendship with Dan both on and off the set, struggled emotionally during production. Lorne Greene also felt the loss deeply, recognizing that the fictional Cartwright family no longer reflected the real friendships that had made the series so special. Even guest actors noticed the difference. Many later commented that although everyone remained professional, a certain joy had disappeared from the production. It was as though an invisible part of the show's spirit had vanished alongside Dan. Audiences noticed the change as well. Viewers understood that television characters occasionally disappeared, but Hoss Cartwright represented something different. He was not simply another member of the cast, he was the emotional center around which many stories revolved. Letters poured into NBC expressing sympathy for Dan's family and sadness over the future of the series. Fans shared personal memories of watching Bonanza together every Sunday, explaining how Hoss had become their favorite character because of his kindness and honesty. Some viewers admitted they found it difficult to continue watching without him. Others remained loyal to the series out of respect for the remaining cast, while acknowledging that something irreplaceable had been lost. Ratings gradually declined, and although multiple factors influenced the show's eventual conclusion, many television historians believe Dan's death marked the beginning of the end for one of America's greatest television. Looking back today, it becomes clear that Dan Blocker's greatest contribution to Bonanza extended beyond any individual episode. He helped establish the emotional foundation upon which the entire series was built. Every smile, every act of compassion, every humorous conversation around the Cartwright dinner table, and every quiet moment of understanding reflected qualities that Dan naturally possessed as a human being. His authenticity elevated not only his own performance, but also the performances of everyone around him. Long after cameras stopped rolling and sets were dismantled, that spirit continued living within the memories of cast members, crew, and millions of viewers who had welcomed the gentle giant into their homes for more than a decade. Even today, when people revisit Bonanza, they often discover that the episodes featuring Hoss Cartwright remain among the most emotionally satisfying. Not because they contain the biggest adventures, but because they capture something timeless about kindness, family, and the quiet strength of a truly good man. As the years passed after Bonanza ended, something remarkable happened that few television executives could have predicted. Instead of fading into history like many popular shows of its era, the series continued finding new audiences through syndication. Local television stations across the United States began airing reruns during afternoons, weekends, and holidays, introducing the Cartwright family to viewers who had been too young, or not even born, when the original episodes first aired. With every new generation came a new appreciation for Dan Blocker's unforgettable performance as Hoss Cartwright. Children who discovered the series in the late 1970s shared it with their own families in the 1980s. Those families introduced it to another generation in the 1990s, and as cable television expanded, Bonanza became one of the most frequently repeated classic westerns in television history. Decades later, streaming services and digital platforms extended that reach even further, allowing audiences from around the world to experience the Ponderosa Ranch whenever they wished. Through every technological change, from black and white televisions to color broadcasts, from VHS tapes to DVDs, and from cable networks to online streaming, Dan Blocker's performance remained timeless. The format evolved, but the emotional impact never diminished. One of the reasons Hoss Cartwright continued resonating with viewers was the universal nature of the character. Television trends constantly change. Different decades celebrate different kinds of heroes. The rugged gunslingers popular in one generation often appear outdated in another, while flashy action stars eventually give way to more complex anti-heroes. Hoss, however, never depended on changing fashions. His appeal rested on qualities that remain meaningful regardless of era or culture. He respected his family, stood beside his friends during difficult times, treated strangers with dignity, admitted mistakes without shame, and believed that protecting others mattered more than proving himself. These values speak to audiences in every generation because they represent ideals people continue aspiring toward. Children admire Hoss because he is kind. Adults appreciate him because they recognize how difficult it is to remain compassionate in a challenging world. Older viewers often see in him a reminder of values they hope will never disappear. As appreciation for classic television grew, entertainment historians began studying Bonanza more closely, recognizing its importance in shaping American popular culture. Numerous documentaries, books, and television specials explored the making of the series, consistently highlighting Dan Blocker's extraordinary contribution. Historians frequently pointed out that while Hoss was initially conceived as the physically imposing member of the Cartwright family, Dan transformed the role into something far richer than the writers originally imagined. Through subtle humor, emotional honesty, and remarkable sincerity, he gave Hoss layers that extended well beyond the typical Western stereotype. Instead of portraying a giant whose strength inspired fear, Dan created a giant whose strength inspired trust. That distinction fundamentally changed the character and ultimately influenced countless television roles that followed. Many later writers acknowledged that audiences responded more strongly to emotionally authentic heroes than to invincible ones, a lesson demonstrated repeatedly by Hoss Cartwright throughout Bonanza's 14-season run. The respect Dan earned among fellow actors also continued growing after his death. Younger performers who never had the opportunity to work alongside him often heard stories from veteran directors and crew members describing his professionalism. They learned how he always arrived prepared, treated everyone with courtesy, and understood that filmmaking required collaboration rather than individual glory. In acting schools, instructors occasionally referenced Dan as an example of an artist who succeeded through honesty rather than theatrical excess. His performances demonstrated that the strongest emotional moments often emerge from restraint, patience, and genuine listening, rather than dramatic displays of emotion. Students studying classic television discovered that Dan's work remained remarkably modern because it focused on truth instead of performance. His scenes continue serving as valuable examples of naturalistic acting decades after they were first filmed. Meanwhile, the Blocker family quietly carried forward his legacy. Rather than constantly revisiting Ta Nchit, he passed, they honored Dan by living according to the principles he had always emphasized. His children pursued their own professional goals while remaining respectful of the remarkable legacy associated with their family name. Interviews with those who knew Dan consistently reinforced the same message. Despite worldwide recognition, he never considered fame his greatest achievement. His proudest accomplishment was being a husband to Dolphia and a father to their 4 children. That perspective remained evident long after his passing. Family members frequently emphasized that behind the famous television personality stood a man who valued ordinary moments above extraordinary headlines. He enjoyed reading with his children, sharing meals together, discussing school assignments, and spending quiet evenings away from public attention. Those simple experiences mattered more to him than awards or celebrity status. Modern audiences often find Dan Blocker's story especially refreshing because it offers a striking contrast to contemporary celebrity culture. Today's entertainment industry frequently rewards constant visibility, personal branding, and social media presence. Dan lived during a very different era, but even by the standards of his own time, he avoided unnecessary publicity. He understood that popularity was temporary, while character was permanent. Instead of carefully constructing a public image, he simply lived according to the values he believed in. Ironically, that authenticity ultimately became one of the greatest reasons people continued admiring him. Fans sensed that the kindness they saw during interviews reflected the same kindness experienced by friends, co-workers, and family members in private life. In an industry where image often differs dramatically from reality, Dan's consistency became one of his defining strengths. Perhaps the most meaningful aspect of Dan Blocker's legacy is the emotional comfort his work continues providing. Countless viewers have described turning to Bonanza during difficult periods in their lives because the series offers reassurance, stability, and hope. Within that comforting world, Hoss Cartwright occupies a unique place. His presence reminds audiences that decency still exists, that forgiveness remains possible, and that genuine strength is inseparable from compassion. These themes have become increasingly valuable in a world often marked by conflict, division, and uncertainty. Watching Hoss treat others with patience and respect encourages viewers to believe that kindness still matters. Few fictional characters achieve such lasting emotional influence, and fewer still owe that influence so completely to the authentic character of the actor portraying them. Looking across the full arc of Dan Blocker's remarkable life, one truth becomes unmistakably clear. He did not become a legend simply because he played an unforgettable role. He became a legend because he brought his own humanity into that role every single day. The little boy born in DeKalb, Texas during the hardships of the Great Depression grew into a gifted athlete, a courageous soldier, a dedicated teacher, a loving husband and father, and ultimately one of the most respected actors in television history. Every experience shaped the compassion audiences later recognized in Hoss Cartwright. His military service taught him the value of peace. His years in education strengthened his patience. His devotion to family deepened his understanding of love and responsibility. His personal humility prevented fame from changing the man he had always been. Even though his life ended far too soon, the values he represented continue reaching millions through every episode of Bonanza. More than 50 years after his passing, Dan Blocker still reminds the world that the greatest legacy anyone can leave is not measured by wealth, awards, or celebrity, but by the lives they touch, the example they set, and the kindness they leave behind. That is why the gentle giant from Texas remains not only a treasured television icon, but an enduring symbol of integrity, compassion, and the timeless power of a truly good heart. Long before Bonanza became one of the most beloved television series in history, very few people in Hollywood believed it would survive its first season. In the late 1950s, American television was already crowded with westerns. Programs like Gunsmoke, Wagon Train, Have Gun, Will Travel, and The Rifleman dominated primetime schedules, leaving many network executives convinced that audiences had reached their limit. Creating another western seemed like a risky investment, especially one that would require a significantly larger budget than its competitors. Yet NBC executives believed they had an opportunity that extended beyond storytelling. The television industry was entering the era of color broadcasting, and NBC wanted a flagship program capable of showcasing the full potential of the new technology. Most American families still owned black and white television sets, meaning viewers would not immediately appreciate the colorful landscapes, costumes, and scenery producers envisioned. Nevertheless, NBC decided to move forward with an ambitious project centered not merely on cowboys and gunfights, but on a family whose relationships would drive every episode. That project would eventually become Bonanza. At the heart of the series stood the fictional Ponderosa Ranch, a vast Nevada cattle empire owned by widower Ben Cartwright and his three sons, Adam, Hoss, and Little Joe. Unlike many westerns that focused primarily on action, Bonanza explored themes of family loyalty, personal responsibility, justice, forgiveness, and moral courage. Every episode placed the Cartwrights in situated lions where emotional decisions mattered as much as physical conflict. This unique approach immediately distinguished the series from many of its competitors, although audiences would take time to recognize its originality. Selecting the right actors became one of the production's greatest challenges. Producers understood that the success of the series depended almost entirely on convincing viewers that the Cartwright family genuinely loved one another. Lorne Greene brought dignity and authority to Ben Cartwright, portraying a father whose wisdom guided the family through countless challenges. Pernell Roberts embodied Adam Cartwright's intelligence, education, and thoughtful personality. Michael Landon infused Little Joe with youthful charm, impulsiveness, and irresistible charisma. Yet one role remained particularly difficult to cast. Hoss Cartwright needed to be physically enormous without appearing frightening, emotionally sensitive without seeming weak, and humorous without becoming a comic stereotype. Numerous actors auditioned, but none captured the delicate balance the writers envisioned. Then Dan Blocker entered the casting room. Standing more than 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighing well over 300 pounds, he certainly possessed the imposing appearance producers wanted. More importantly, however, he radiated warmth, humility, and quiet kindness from the moment he began reading the script. Casting directors immediately recognized that audiences would instinctively trust him. Dan was not pretending to be a gentle giant. He genuinely was one. His years as a teacher, soldier, husband, and father had shaped a personality perfectly suited to Hoss Cartwright. Looking back, many historians consider his casting one of the greatest decisions in television history because no other performer could have brought the same authenticity to the role. Filming the early episodes required extraordinary effort from everyone involved. Outdoor scenes frequently took place under intense California heat, with actors spending long days on horseback while wearing heavy Western costumes. Dust, unpredictable weather, and physically demanding action sequences became routine parts of production. Horses occasionally behaved unpredictably. Complicated camera equipment had to function reliably in difficult environments, and maintaining continuity across lengthy shooting schedules required meticulous attention to detail. Despite these challenges, the cast quickly developed remarkable chemistry, both on and off the set. During breaks between scenes, laughter often echoed across the filming locations as the actors joked with one another, shared meals, and discussed upcoming storylines. Dan Blocker played a major role in creating this welcoming atmosphere. His booming laugh, relaxed personality, and genuine concern for everyone around him helped transform long workdays into enjoyable experiences. Crew members frequently remembered that Dan never behaved like a celebrity. Whether speaking with producers, makeup artists, camera operators, or production assistants, he treated everyone with equal respect. This spirit of cooperation spread throughout the production, creating an unusually positive working environment that many participants later described as feeling like an extended family rather than a television crew. Despite everyone's hard work, the first season produced disappointing ratings. Industry observers questioned whether Bonanza would survive. NBC executives worried about the high production costs associated with filming in color, especially since relatively few households could fully appreciate the visual investment. Some critics argued that audiences preferred faster-paced westerns centered on gunfights rather than emotional family drama. Cancellation appeared increasingly likely. Then NBC made a decision that would permanently alter television history. The network moved Bonanza to Sunday evening, a time when entire families were more likely to watch television together. The impact proved extraordinary. Ratings began climbing steadily as viewers discovered that the series offered something unique. Parents appreciated stories emphasizing honesty, responsibility, and family values. Children admired the adventurous spirit of the Cartwright brothers. Grandparents connected with Ben Cartwright's wisdom and Hoss's compassion. Instead of appealing to only one generation, Bonanza succeeded in bringing entire families together every week. Word of mouth spread rapidly, and before long, the once struggling series became one of America's highest-rated programs. The gamble on color television had paid off spectacularly, establishing Bonanza as a flagship series for NBC and helping accelerate public interest in purchasing color television sets. As popularity grew, the Ponderosa Ranch became one of television's most recognizable fictional locations. Although audiences imagined an enormous Nevada ranch stretching across breathtaking landscapes, much of the production relied on carefully selected filming locations throughout California combined with elaborate studio sets. The famous Cartwright house became almost as beloved as the characters themselves. Its spacious living room, massive stone fireplace, elegant wooden staircase, and memorable dining table formed the backdrop for countless emotional conversations that defined the series. Fans often felt they knew every corner of the home because it appeared so frequently throughout 14 seasons. The dinner table, in particular, evolved into one of television's most iconic settings. Unlike many westerns that emphasized conflict, Bonanza repeatedly returned to family meals where disagreements were discussed, lessons were learned, jokes were shared, and relationships deepened. These scenes reminded viewers that the Cartwrights were not merely cowboys, they were a family. Dan Blocker's Hoss often brought warmth and humor to these gatherings, using gentle wit and genuine affection to strengthen the emotional bond among the characters. Those quiet moments became just as memorable as the dramatic adventures taking place across the Ponderosa. Behind the scenes, the success of Bonanza transformed everyone involved. The cast suddenly found themselves recognized wherever they traveled. Fan mail arrived by the thousands every week. Children dressed as Cartwrights for school events. Toy manufacturers produced Western-themed merchandise inspired by the series, and international broadcasters acquired rights to air the show around the world. Yet despite extraordinary fame, Dan Blocker remained remarkably grounded. He continued approaching each episode with the same professionalism that had characterized his earliest auditions. Directors appreciated that he never treated success as permission to become complacent. Every script received careful attention, every rehearsal mattered, and every performance reflected his commitment to giving audiences the very best work he could offer. That consistency became one of the invisible foundations supporting Bonanza's extraordinary longevity. Viewers trusted the series because they trusted the people creating it, and no member of the cast embodied that trust more completely than Dan Blocker. As the years passed, Bonanza evolved from a risky television experiment into a worldwide cultural phenomenon, proving that stories centered on family, compassion, loyalty, and integrity possessed a timeless appeal capable of transcending generations. At the heart of that remarkable achievement stood a gentle giant from Texas whose authenticity transformed both a fictional character and the history of television forever. As Bonanza continued dominating television throughout the 1960s, life behind the cameras became just as fascinating as the stories unfold. On screen. To millions of viewers, the Cartwright family appeared so natural that many assumed the actors had known each other for years before the series began. In reality, they came from very different backgrounds. Lorne Greene was an experienced Canadian broadcaster and actor known for his commanding voice and calm authority. Pernell Roberts had established himself as a talented stage performer with a strong interest in Shakespeare. Michael Landon was a young, ambitious actor determined to become one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Dan Blocker, meanwhile, arrived with the unique life experience of being a former soldier, teacher, college athlete, and stage performer. At first glance, they seemed unlikely to form such convincing family chemistry. Yet within weeks of production, something extraordinary happened. Their different personalities complemented one another perfectly. Lorne Greene naturally assumed a fatherly role, often offering advice both on and off the set. Michael Landon's quick wit kept everyone laughing during long filming days. Pernell Roberts brought thoughtful discussions about acting and storytelling, while Dan Blocker acted as the steady emotional center, using humor and quiet kindness to keep the atmosphere relaxed whenever tensions arose. Crew members later recalled that Dan possessed a rare ability to make everyone around him feel comfortable. New guest stars who arrived feeling nervous frequently found themselves welcomed by Dan's warm smile and genuine conversation before cameras even started rolling. Despite the family atmosphere, producing a weekly television series during that era demanded extraordinary discipline. Unlike modern productions that often spend months filming a single season, Bonanza operated under relentless deadlines. Scripts arrived continuously, rehearsals were tightly scheduled, costumes required constant maintenance, horses needed careful handling, and outdoor filming often depended on unpredictable weather conditions. A single delayed scene could affect dozens of cast and crew members, making professionalism absolutely essential. Dan Blocker quickly earned a reputation as one of the production's most reliable actors. Directors appreciated that he always arrived prepared, having memorized every line and carefully considered his character's emotional journey before rehearsals even began. His military background had taught him punctuality and discipline, while his years as a teacher strengthened his patience during the repetitive process of filming multiple takes. Camera operators often commented that Dan never complained about long hours or physically demanding scenes. Whether standing under the hot California sun for hours or repeating horseback sequences until every camera angle looked perfect, he approached each task with the same quiet determination. One of the remarkable aspects of Dan's performance as Hoss Cartwright was the balance he maintained between humor and emotional depth. Writers soon realized that audiences loved Hoss not only because of his enormous physical strength, but because he brought warmth to every episode. As a result, scripts increasingly centered around his character. Some episodes highlighted Hoss's compassion for orphaned children, others explored his friendships with outsiders facing prejudice, while still others focused on his love of animals or his willingness to sacrifice personal happiness for the well-being of others. Dan embraced these storylines because they reflected values he genuinely believed in. Rather than playing Hoss as merely a lovable giant, he portrayed him as a complete human being capable of joy, sadness, disappointment, hope, and quiet wisdom. Critics began praising his performances for their emotional authenticity, noting that he could move audiences to laughter one moment and tears the next without ever appearing artificial. This remarkable range transformed Hoss from a supporting character into one of television's most beloved personalities. Away from the cameras, Dan remained deeply committed to his family despite his increasingly demanding schedule. Success brought financial security, but it also required long hours away from home. Determined not to allow fame to distance him from his wife and children, Dan carefully protected his personal life. Whenever filming ended, he preferred returning home rather than attending Hollywood parties or celebrity gatherings. Friends often joke that convincing Dan to attend glamorous industry events required considerable persuasion because he would much rather spend an evening reading, talking with his children, or simply relaxing with Dolphia. His priorities remained remarkably consistent throughout his career. No matter how famous he became, he continued viewing himself first as a husband and father, second as an actor. This perspective earned admiration from colleagues who recognized how rare such balance could be in the entertainment industry. As Bonanza expanded internationally, Dan's popularity spread far beyond the United States. Viewers in Europe, Australia, Latin America, and numerous other regions embraced Hoss Cartwright with the same affection shown by American audiences. Letters arrived from around the world expressing admiration for the character's kindness and integrity. Many fans wrote that Hoss reminded them of people they had known in their own communities, strong individuals who quietly helped others without seeking recognition. This international response surprised even the producers. They had expected Western adventures to attract audiences primarily interested in American frontier history. Instead, they discovered that the universal themes embodied by Hoss, compassion, loyalty, honesty, and family devotion, crossed cultural and national boundaries with remarkable ease. Dan himself expressed gratitude for this global appreciation, often remarking that kindness was a language everyone understood regardless of where they lived. As the series entered its later seasons, the cast developed an almost instinctive understanding of one another's acting styles. Scenes required fewer rehearsals because each performer knew how the others would naturally respond. Michael Landon frequently praised Dan's generosity during emotional sequences, noting that Dan always focused on making the entire scene stronger rather than drawing attention to himself. Lorne Greene admired Dan's reliability, describing him as someone producers never needed to worry about because his professionalism never wavered. Even guest actors who appeared for only a single episode often remembered working with Dan as one of the highlights of their careers. Many later shared stories about his encouragement, his patience with inexperienced performers, and his ability to make every member of the cast feel like an important contributor rather than merely a supporting player. These memories continued surfacing long after his death, reinforcing the remarkable consistency of his reputation throughout Hollywood. Perhaps the greatest testament to Dan Blocker's influence lies in the way audiences continue responding to Hoss Cartwright today. New generations discovering Bonanza often find themselves unexpectedly drawn to the gentle giant, despite being unfamiliar with the cultural context of the 1960s. Children still laugh at Hoss's good-natured humor, adults still admire his moral courage, and families still appreciate the compassion that defines his every action. In an entertainment landscape increasingly dominated by complex anti-heroes and morally ambiguous protagonists, Hoss remains refreshingly sincere. He reminds viewers that goodness can be compelling, that kindness requires strength rather than weakness, and that genuine heroes often reveal themselves through quiet acts of compassion rather than dramatic displays of power. These timeless qualities explain why Dan Blocker's performance has endured for more than half a century. He did not simply create a memorable television character, he created a lasting symbol of humanity at its very best. Long after the final episode aired and the cameras stopped rolling, the gentle giant from Texas continued inspiring millions, not because of what he accomplished on screen alone, but because every performance reflected the genuine decency of the man behind the character. As Bonanza reached the height of its popularity, the pressure on its stars increased dramatically. By the mid-1960s, the series had become one of the most watched television programs in America, attracting tens of millions of viewers each week. Newspapers regularly published stories about the cast, magazines featured them on their covers, and fans crowded airports, hotels, and public events hoping to catch a glimpse of the actors who had become part of their weekly lives. For many celebrities, this level of fame proved overwhelming, but Dan Blocker approached it with the same calm perspective that had guided him throughout his life. He appreciated the admiration of fans, yet he never confused popularity with personal worth. Friends often recalled that Dan remained the same man, whether he was speaking to a television executive, a studio janitor, or a young child asking for an autograph. Fame changed his schedule, but it never changed his character. That unwavering humility became one of the defining qualities that separated him from many of Hollywood's biggest stars. One reason Dan remained grounded was his deep appreciation for the struggles that had shaped his early years. Unlike performers who achieved success at a young age, he remembered working ordinary jobs, studying late into the night, serving in the military, and standing in front of classrooms teaching students who depended on him every day. Those experiences never left him. Whenever reporters asked about his extraordinary success, he often redirected attention toward the importance of education, family, and hard work, rather than discussing Hollywood glamour. He believed acting was an honorable profession, but he never considered it more valuable than teaching or military service. That perspective earned enormous respect from people inside and outside the entertainment industry because it reflected genuine gratitude rather than carefully crafted public relations. As Hoss Cartwright grew more popular, writers increasingly developed storylines specifically designed to showcase Dan's remarkable emotional range. Some episodes focused on Hoss defending innocent people against injustice, while others explored his loneliness, his hopes for marriage, or his quiet disappointment when life failed to unfold as expected. These stories allowed Dan to demonstrate that behind Hoss's enormous physical strength existed a deeply sensitive human being. Audiences responded enthusiastically because they recognized parts of themselves within the character. Hoss struggled with self-doubt, occasionally misunderstood the intentions of others, experienced heartbreak, and questioned his own decisions, yet he consistently